Hello, welcome to the session, which is a Women in BIM panel on behalf of Women in BIM and a panel session representing women in BIM in Thailand. And what I'll do is, my name is Rebecca DeChico. I will be giving you an introduction as to who are women in BIM and the work that women in BIM have been undertaking all over the world. So bear with me while I share my screen. And basically, Women in BIM are a very much an affiliation of the UK BIM task group, and the UK BIM task group
in progress.
are obviously have been very active in the way that they have been obviously sharing and working with women in the BIM related roles. And I'd like to just give a presentation. Unfortunately, I can't share my screen. I've had some troubleshooting issues this afternoon rather. So Cece, if you'd like to just bring up the presentation and share your screen, that would be great, and we can move through those slides. While that's happening, I'd just like to thank everybody again for attending our session, where we will be discussing women in BIM in a bit more detail, as well as the current uptake of BIM in Thailand and the current maturity of BIM in Thailand, which is a very important discussion point for our panelists today. So with that, I'll just, Cece, if you can please share the presentation if that's possible, and we'll go from there, as I currently can't do that at the moment. So thank you. So if we start with, I guess, a little bit of history around women in BIM for those of you that are attending today, and we'll just move to the correct slide. This is very much to give those of you who are interested in women in BIM a little bit of a historical context regarding the group and the group's history across the world, and some of the work that we've been doing to support BIM in the context of the construction industry. Now, what we really have been focused on is addressing the issues with diversity in the construction industry, and really what those issues are. So just next slide. Yep, if we just hang here for 1 second. Women in BIM very much were established as a networking affiliation, again, as a response to the UK BIM task group's work and some of the work that has been undertaken across the UK in terms of the BIM policy. The three key objectives and core drivers of women in BIM is very much to support the industry in encouraging young women to enter careers in BIM, to effectively drive diversity across our industry, to ensure that we are continually attracting and promoting the right skills across industry, and also to address the issues with attracting and rather advancing and retaining women in these roles across the industry. So next slide, please. Women in BIM effectively have been a group that have been created to support the industry's response to diversity, which has very much been a core driver as the group has progressed and grown over the world in the last 10 or so years. So next slide, please. So Women in BIM was founded by myself in 2012. We now have a core team, which is basically very much still driven out of the UK. We have thousands of members all over the world, but effectively these 5 people have been the core team driving our global initiatives. And the companies that we represent, obviously, my name is Rebecca DeChico and I represent now Oricon, and I act as the founder and global chair. We have Vicky Reynolds, who represents i3PT as the global vice chair in the UK, Dr. Jenny Barrett, who is our education lead, again based out of the UK. Gogana Stakova is our database lead, and Nicole DeChico, who's our global administrator. Next slide, please. So the reason why this is very important to me personally and to the industry is that the United Nations have sustainability goals that they need to achieve to effectively try to alleviate the pressure on our cities and our countries across the world. And one of the goals of the United Nations is to ensure that we have global diversity. Much of the work undertaken by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum suggests that we are still having issues with retaining and obviously welcoming women and those of diverse minorities and ethnic backgrounds into the construction industry. And therefore, diversity effectively is going to address some of the skills shortages and also has been proven to support organizational wide innovation, creativity, and profitability. So it is a very important initiative, not just one that we would like to achieve, one that is very much a very critical as a response to the future industry and the future needs of our industry. Next slide, please. And as we move through these slides, really, it's just to give you a little bit of context as to the fact that there have been quite a number of different groups created as a response to diversity, but Women in BIM very much was a response to the BIM uptake across the world. And I'm sure our panelists will be able to give you a little bit more insight into the current maturity of BIM in Thailand. But certainly what we have done is we have created a member database within our portal, our website, womeninbim.org, which now is continually growing. We have members all over the world, as you can see here, as well as a large social media following, as well as industry affiliations and groups that support us. Next slide, please. We've also been hosting webinars and podcasts, and this is just to give you, again, some context. We have a YouTube page if you are interested, and we constantly are providing thought leadership on a global front to industry, not just for women in BIM, but for all of those who work in BIM and that are working in BIM all over the world. Regional leads are those that represent women in BIM, and regional leads effectively are volunteers. And we have one regional lead on our session today, Benyatip, who's also representing Oricon. But we have regional leads that effectively are appointed within the Women in BIM initiative to support the, I guess, the global representation of women in their representative regions. So in Thailand, obviously, we're trying to grow visibility for women in BIM because we now have a regional lead, but we effectively have 50 people, women across the world, that across 25 countries, that are now building and supporting and growing our initiative to ensure that we start to address these issues. We've also hosted a mentor scheme, and I'm keen to, I would be interested, I guess, to keep in touch for those of you who are interested in supporting our mentor scheme. We launched the mentor scheme in 2020. We have mentor applications that go out every year, and we match effectively mentors and mentees to support women in BIM related roles in their careers, both on a technical and personal front. Next slide, please. And just quickly, we can move through this slide very quickly, but you know that we have obviously shown to the world that not only are our mentor scheme is very important on a global front, but the numbers, if you go to the next slide, are increasing. We have members or mentor scheme initiative that is running again for the second year. And if you just move to the next slide, you'll see the uptake or the increase of the numbers over the last 12 months. Next slide, please. This, I think it's the next slide, rather, sorry. And we've included the obviously the initiative Women in BIM Mentor Scheme initiative all over the world, and we have different projects that support women in BIM. And I think as we move through the slides, you'll see that there are different initiatives to support our thought leadership all over the world, and obviously support the fact that women in BIM need to be promoted and supported in our respective regions. Next slide, please. We host webinars, as you know, probably through this webinar, which has been a fantastic initiative in Thailand. We also host webinars, if you're interested, womeninbim.org, where we have hosted webinars on not only the UK activities in terms of the BIM policy in the UK, but also some of the impacts of the global construction industry post-COVID, as well as networking events, which focus on sharing and discussing BIM-related topics on both a technical and a process front. Next slide. And we have hosted events all over the world. Here are some examples. In Australia, we've had a Careers in BIM series. In Spain, we've hosted a Spanish series in Spanish, where we have discussed some of the different initiatives in BIM in Spain, so which is very exciting for our group. Next slide. And if you'd just like to move through the last few slides, we have recorded podcasts on specific topics across the UK, the US, and Australia at present. We're looking at hosting podcasts for our teams in Hong Kong, New Zealand, and obviously other regions of the world, including the US. Next slide. Yep. And we have different initiatives and different groups that are supported. So I just have a few more minutes left here, but we have our APAC group, or Asia Pacific group, for women in BIM, where we're meeting on a regular basis once a month to discuss how we can obviously encourage and support women in BIM. We have a European group and a US or a Central America / South American group, where we have meetings, core team meetings through the year to discuss women in BIM. Different projects are currently happening. This is probably close to the end of the presentation, but we have a number of different projects. And if you are interested in supporting us across the UK, Australia, and the United States, some of the projects are very much relating to what is happening in that region. For example, in the UK, obviously a very strong BIM policy. In Australia, there are different initiatives across different state governments when it comes to BIM and digital engineering, as well as in the United States, where we're looking at a research project on deciphering the difference between our roles and responsibilities, and some of the gender pay gaps that still exist across the world. Next slide. Yep. And as I mentioned, we're in our second year of the mentor scheme. Here's just an update of where we are. We have obviously our mentors now matched with their mentees, and we're now hosting unmatched activities. So those that cannot be matched with a mentor, we're actually giving those people further support by hosting events across the year. And as you move to the next slide, please, you'll see that the UMA activities, or unmatched applicant activities, are very much there to support the way that obviously the industry requires that support. So just the next slide, please. Sorry, the next slide after this one, if you can see the unmatched applicant activities, you can see that there's quite a large representation of different groups and mentees and mentors across different countries. If we move to the next slide, I'm hoping you'll see the, next slide. You'll see the different topics that we're discussing as part of our unmatched applicant activities. We are very much focusing on education, BIM basics, career coaching, BIM resources, and then obviously technical discussions on some of the technologies, not just Autodesk, but other technologies, and then obviously the standards, so alignment to industry standards. So I think if we move through, we're just in time for our panel discussion, where I'd like to firstly start off by introducing myself again formally, and then allowing each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So if you could just go back one, or maybe stop sharing the screen, we can then move to the panel session. The first, I guess, part of the panel session is very much to understand our experience as panelists. So my experience is vast. My background is in architecture. I've worked across industry for many years in architecture, and more recently I've moved into Oricon is a large engineering advisory company supporting industry, and I very much hold a senior position in that company, supporting the implementation, education, and strategic drivers for BIM and digital engineering across that country, which supports clients in Asia and Australia. So with that, any questions we can move on to obviously in the chat box, but what I'd like to do is allow all of our panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll start off with Ms. Benyatip Manajit from Oricon. Thanks, Benyatip.
Yeah, hi, yeah. I am Benyatip, and currently I am the Information Management Lead Consultant from Oricon, and also a Woman in BIM Regional Lead for Thailand as well. I have background education in architecture and urban planning, but currently working as a BIM consultant. I actually enter the BIM world through, like many people, using the software as a PO production tool. Then, learning more about it, knowing and using BIM as a process along the way. And now working as a BIM consultant, BIM manager, BIM coordinator for major developers in Thailand, help them transform their business using the BIM process, and also assist them in managing and implementing BIM process in their particular projects as well.
Yeah, wonderful. What great experience. Thanks, Benyatip. Our next panelist is Ms. Kezani Watanabe, if I've pronounced that right.
That's correct, Rebecca. Thank you. And thank you to Nong Thieu as well. All right. I think we all here, we know each other, for some time since actually we implement BIM in Thailand. So myself, Kezani, or people in Thailand, they call me Kay or Casey. Basically, my background is also the same as Nong Thieu, which is the architect as well. And that is my bachelor degree, and my master degree is in landscape architecture. But working across in Australia and Thailand, so it's actually helped me develop and understand that the BIM process is very important to implement in the organization. So when I moved back from Melbourne back to Thailand, I used to work in design firm called Hustle, and then start working with my partner back in Australia. So that is when JI Group start. So myself as a general manager, and also we still working as a designer, but also we working as a BIM consultant as well. Thank you, Ka.
That's a wonderful introduction. And funnily enough, I worked for Hassel early in my career. I don't know if we spoke about that last time we spoke, but interesting that we've both worked for the same company. So thank you so much, Casey. And our next panelist and final panelist for this session is Miss Jirapur Thamaraksai.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jirapur Thamaraksai, but you can call me Care. I start as a student in a university who study in the Faculty of Architecture. I use BIM as a tool to produce my designs productions work. Back then, I didn't know what a collaborations or BIM is yet. Then later, I've studied in a master's degree and chose to do my thesis on BIM. So this is when I start to realize what is BIM in terms of methodology. To further my career, I saw BIM as an opportunity to gain knowledge and understand more about the project lifecycle. So right now I'm working as BIM specialist at AP Thailand, the developer of residential properties for 30 years, with the missions to empower living to deliver good quality of life to our customer. I have been implement BIM in more than 20 high-rise residential projects, from high-end to super luxury product segment located in the heart of Bangkok. And my work involved planning, facilitating, and managing the transitions to complex and integrate BIM system with the project's ecosystem. Include the creations of roadmap, workflow, and standards suitable for the organized identify go toward the company strategies of everything digital, and BIMs are one of them. Yeah, thank you.
What a wonderful group of ladies we have on the panel today. And I host a lot of panels actually for events. And I think this is one of the most exciting I've ever been involved with, for two reasons. Firstly, Thailand obviously is, starting to very much move ahead in terms of the maturity in BIM. And we've found through our previous discussions that that's something that we're really interested in discussing today in terms of the maturity of BIM in Thailand. And I guess that the first point really to talk about is with your experience, and I think, Casey, it's probably a good place for you to start. In your experience in BIM in Thailand, what do you feel is the current level of adoption across industry, not just in the design side, but I guess across all sectors? And what's your kind of take on that?
I think for Thailand, we have to say that we start BIM adoptions for the past, let's say, 10 years. And regarding to that, until now in 2021, if you would say today we have a session because of Thailand BIM Association in Thailand, which means it's not only for TBIM, we also have a BIM committee in Architect Council of Thailand, and also in the Engineering Council, and also in the Institute of Engineering as well. So for the rate of the BIM adoption in Thailand, it has been, I think, really good. However, I would say that in terms of the standard and in terms of the knowledge to students as well in the university, and also for people who work in the design firm, construction firm, and towards facility management, I think we still need a lot of the maybe a panel like this one, or maybe a workshop or something to educate them a little bit more on this. For the past 10 years, we have seen a huge development, especially towards, as Nong Claire said, like in terms of the real estate developers. They become the main leader who actually implement BIM in their project. So most of the project that we implement in Thailand, it's more towards high-rise building. However, if you can see that Asia has been developing very fast at the moment. We connect through China, through Singapore. We having the speed rail. We having the a lot of infrastructure works, which those of things has to be involved in BIM. And BIM actually help everyone, let's say designers, architect, interior design, engineer to work all together. And we can actually collaborate those work in construction. So for me, I think the maturity in Thailand is getting better. And in terms of the standard, which I think is going to be tomorrow, that we're going to have a public hearing on the BIM object standard for the first time in Thailand. And we hope that after we pass this public hearing, it's going to be the major standard for every companies or either a design firm or the owner to adopt this. And let's set that as a minimum standard. If let's say AP Thailand has even more better standard, we can also working towards that high standard. And I think everyone also having a better idea on ISO 19650 as well, which is it's become a global standard that everyone would like to work. Everyone who actually work on BIM has to understand that how can we actually collaborate together to work the whole process.
Yeah, because I think one of the questions that most people have is, the level of maturity of the adoption of 19650, which is a really important thing to discuss. And I think we'll move on to that in a second. But I think firstly, I'd really like to hear from Jirapur in regard to, your experience in your organization regarding BIM and some of the initiatives and I guess the processes, etc., that you guys have been able to implement.
Yeah, sure. AP is one of the Thailand leading properties developer firms. Normally, we launch 3 to 4 condominium projects per year. Total project value is around 15,000 to 20,000 million baht. So therefore, in order to elevate the quality of AP residential properties, we started to look for something new, process or new technology. And here we are on BIM process. So we have been implementing BIM in high-rise residential for more than 15 projects in the last 3 years. And we implement BIM across project lifecycle from feasibility study to design stage, construction stage, and building operations. working with a variety of parties such as designer, contractor, constructions management team to even building operations team with a bunch of internal departments like product development teams, project manager, constructions process teams, and many more. So BIM start to become normal practice for AP Thailand. Like no one's asking what is BIM, what is BIM?
Why we have to do BIM?
Yeah, what is BIM? Is because we spend a lot of time build awareness and build fundamental knowledge in our ecosystem at the first.
True.
And,
Yeah.
so basically, I think BIM start to become normal practice in some process for private sector.
Yeah,
I think
because
yeah,
I was just going to say, because most of the countries that have implemented BIM, it's very difficult to measure the maturity. And I think when we talk to companies individually, it's very easy to understand the maturity of that organization. But as industry as a whole in a particular region, there are pockets of innovation, and then obviously, as we know, there are pockets of areas that require support and education. So that's really exciting to hear that, I think, in regard to the company, to AP and high-rise residential buildings. And I think it's really important we touch on that a bit later regarding the importance of BIM really for high-rise residential buildings. But before we do that, I think I'd like to hear from Benyatip. I mean, really from a consultant's point of view, and obviously we represent the same company, but obviously you have a lot more insight to what's happening in Thailand. Certainly, from your point of view, I mean, where do you feel the maturity lies in terms of BIM?
Yeah, I think since I have implemented BIM and in the workflow and in the construction industry from the start, I definitely feel that there are growing demand of using BIM process within the construction design and construction itself. And I think before people have known BIM mostly as a tool and request to use it as a way of like improve the productivity or maybe efficiency of the productivity process. And that's kind of created a baseline or like an expansion of modeling skill, which is a good base to the next step of development. And now, as Nong Kiara said, the industry have more understanding of what BIM can do, and they have more demand of the information and aware of how BIM can help them collect those kind of information through the BIM process to serve all of the life cycle, especially for the developers and private sector that can use all of these information for their assets and facility management. So I think right now we are transforming into the age of information, the age where BIM can really be used in a fuller potential what it can do now in Thailand. So yeah, exciting time.
It really is. I think there's a lot of different regions of the world that are really starting to drive innovation, not just through government initiatives, but also through the private sector. And I think it's really important to discuss, how BIM is impacted both on the private and public sector. And certainly the women in BIM representation in Thailand is quite low. So it's really important that we start to tell people about, where Thailand sits in terms of BIM maturity, but also, to become BIM compliant. I mean, Kessini, we mentioned earlier the importance of 19650, the series, obviously 19650 series of standards, which was obviously released over the last few years to support a consistent application of process rather than technology. And I think that's really starting to help us, isn't it, in regard to, I guess, the level of adoption and how important a consistent framework is. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of, I guess, being on the road to being BIM compliant to ISO 19650?
I think for this section, maybe Oracle would have a better sample of 19650. We have to say that for BIM implementation in Thailand, most of the project has been an initiative from private sector rather than the government. For the past 10 years, the people who actually start on this, they are developers, they are contractors who actually seeing the BIM use and all the benefits that they can use. And currently, I think as Nong Tiu said that we are in the new age, it's digital age. And for currently we're doing basically it's a data driven era at the moment. So to do that, we start to get a lake of data. And if we don't have a proper standard, it means sometimes the data that we got, it could be just useless. So right now, I think we're trying to set up the standard, and that's when ISO 19650 become quite important, because some people, they call this ISO, they call ISO BIM, but actually it's not only about BIM. It's everything is about organization information requirements. It's about project information requirement, and towards the end, it's regarding the asset integrity as well. So if the owner understand about that for more, and we have this proper standard, then we all can work in BIM process. And I think that ISO 19650 will be a very good guide for us to follow. One thing that we realize, that's why I say maybe Kun Benyatip can give a better case study, because in Thailand, we are doing design, build, which the ISO 19650, as you mentioned previously, is actually it better for design build, which is like part of our company work for transportation for New South Wales, and we can see the difference in terms of the how fast people can adopt the standard in Australia, and how slow we can adopt that standard in Thailand.
And I think, look, I think in terms of the experience I have coming from the UK and then back into Australia and working across APAC now, Asia Pacific, I think there's certainly, still some challenges when it comes to the adoption of 19650 for a number of reasons for our audience. Firstly, because we've only seen obviously parts 1, 2, 3, and 5 released. We are still waiting for part 4, which will focus on information exchange, and part 6, which will focus on health and safety. Yes. And those two parts will then form, this entire suite or series. But certainly when it comes to promoting your organization and being certified, I think very, very important. And I think maybe we will jump to Benyatip in terms of, the consulting point of view. And what are your thoughts in terms of setting up projects and the adoption of 19650 on your projects locally?
I think because right now, as I've mentioned before, that we are entering the age of data driven, and the information which is required by the clients are very important. The conventional way that we work in Thailand in particular may not really facilitate that kind of flow of information or exchange of information. I think one step that we do now is that we use BIM to help with that process, with that collecting of information throughout the way. But the ISO 19650 is like a standard which kind of allow each of the steps to be more clear. It can help to ensure that whatever the final products will come out, and whatever the information that are required are mostly met by collecting it at the right time and share it for the right people, right? I think for Bangkok itself, then there are some of the developers who are interested in this already. We actually have created the guideline or the BIM execution plan for our clients, which already comply with the 19650 standards. So they can use it as a protocol for their own company, and also protocol for their suppliers, to ensure that their process of request, getting an exchange of the information are as they are required. So we are also exploring whether we can help them certifying the ISO 19650 as well. And for our Oricon office in Bangkok, we do getting ourselves ready to comply with the 19650 by roll out our new internal standard so that we allow ourselves to be already compliant to 19650. So our internal exchange of information and also the exchange of information with the clients, with our suppliers, are complying with all of this to ensure that all of the information required are rolled out in the way that is the most effective, and we can use that. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, look, it's a really challenging space to be able to be 100% compliant, I think, to 19650. But, as long as we're on in the right direction effectively, and that all lies on the the authority managing the project, so the client, right? So how do we make sure that the client's requirements are there for us so that we can tender effectively on the projects? I mean, it's really interesting because it's not just about obviously our point of view working on projects, but I think Jirapur, from your perspective as the client side, it is very important to have those requirements, information requirements, defined as early as possible, and obviously all of the team to adopt that process. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Since you guys talk about ISO 19650, honestly, I've been aware for that about like 2 years ago that I went to Singapore. That's when the first time that I heard about this ISO. But the thing is that we have been implementing them for like 3 years, more than 15 project now. So we basically have our own standards. We call them AP BIM standard. So right now, what we're trying to study more on ISO 19650 to see which part that we can implement them or apply them in our standard that we already have, because it starts to become normal practice for our ecosystem, Yeah.
And I mean, what do you think of the challenges with the adoption? I mean, we discussed previously some of the issues with, the lack of education or the lack of the understanding really of the process. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, right now I think currently we are facing right now is about the lack of education, right? I have interviewed like people who apply for BIM specialist positions, like more than 50 persons. Gotta say that only 20% of new graduate students who have an experience on.
That's a lot already, non class.
Yeah. It took me like so many days on an interview. Okay. There are only 20% of them who has an experience on BIM model authoring. Yeah, but the good thing is that like all of them starting to realize what BIM can enhance their capabilities or how BIM can further their career path. That was the good thing. So for the
Which
last
is so important. Yeah.
Yes. So for the last couple of years, AP Thailand went on a roadshow to share our experience and BIM implementations with the universities to build the awareness and how much we value who are capable of doing BIM. Yeah, and
that's wonderful.
And a part of roadshows, we also developed some things we call BIM online, so that our employee can study BIM anywhere, anytime that they want. And we decided to share that with the university the last year, so that students can just jump in and study and get a better pictures of what is BIM implementation.
Yeah, so important.
Very good. Yeah.
And I know, Casey, you've got some opinions on that. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to add up on that, Rebecca, I think what Nong Claire mentioned, I think that is really good that when she mentioned that if she interview 50 students and at least 20 students know about that, because most of the time that I found, they understand about Revit or ArchiCAD, but sometimes they cannot link those things into the BIM process. So I realized that in terms of the awareness for our profession, let's say architect, most of our team are an architect. For the past 10 years, I think it's still too minimum. I think for university, they would need to start implementing BIM in their maybe design projects or integrated with the other subject like construction details, and start using BIM to show the students that the BIM process is actually involved with the whole ecosystem and the whole building life cycles, starting from design, simulations, or even moving towards the construction management or project management, it actually has a benefits on that as well. And not only implement the modeling tools such as Revit or AutoCAD, but they will have to prepare them in the university that when they come out, they actually have more roles rather than just being a designers. So they would need to understand, let's say, the collaboration or coordination that you might need, the other softwares, Solibri, Navisworks, or Unifi, something like that. And there are also other simulation part that they can involve as well. But I would say that there are more people who actually interested in BIM, and there are more actually women to start to apply for the job like BIM coordinator or a BIM specialist. Previously, my team might be a little bit different from Oregon and AP, but most of my team, let's say 80 or 90% of my team is a guy. So I definitely would like to know how they actually, implement the ecosystem that works for women in BIM process as well. Because once we get into the meeting, most of the time, either the local project or international project, I would say 80% of the people who involved in that still being a guy.
It's funny because one of the things that we often get asked as women in BIM is, why it's important. And I mentioned earlier when we first started the importance of obviously alignment to, the globally recognized sustainability goals, which addressed gender equality as an important issue to affect the global economy, really, because there's issues with skills shortages, etc. And look, one of the reasons I started the group to begin with back in the UK was I was like you, one of the very few women in at any of the BIM conferences or, in the BIM meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And it's important for men and women to recognize the importance of diversity and how that can promote innovation, really, across projects. But I mean, I guess I'd like to hear from the panel now in regard to, why they feel a community like Women in BIM can help to address some of those skills shortages, because we are still really at a critical skills shortage in BIM and digital engineering across industry. And I think, it's important to address this issue. So I guess, Casey, what's your point of view, obviously, when it comes to this?
For me, I think women in BIM will actually helps a lot. The first thing is actually the culture. I would not miss this one because being Thai or being Asia, sometimes being a woman, it's quite hard to actually step up or say something. It might be because of our education, since kindergarten or things like that. We are a very good listener and we are a very good planner. I think for women, we all have plans in mind, especially if we want to travel, we will lie out everything, but with that skills to become the BIM coordinator or to work in the BIM process, we can use all that skill to manage people, to lay out the plan, to actually do a lot of research and development. And all those skills that women has is very important to fill in the gap that we have in the industry, especially in Thailand right now. We have a lot of technical people. The thing is, a good coordinator who can collaborate all the work. I realized that, especially, let's say, Oregon teams led by Kun Benyatip, when we meet in the meeting, I realized that, that team is really good because, maybe because of women have empathy. And when we do design thinking, empathy is a very important thing as well. And that skill becomes something that we need to step up, which means maybe we have to not only encourage, but we have to educate a lot of girls in the university or girls who actually start working in their early years to understand that the whole range of BIM, they have a lot of opportunities in that.
I'm totally agree. I think, you know, having education as early as possible. I was only having that conversation earlier today with encouraging young women across school and university to enter careers in BIM, which is just so important. And I think, Benyatip, I mean, what's your point of view, not only internally within Oricon in regard to some of the women maybe moving into the BIM space, but maybe across industry in Thailand? I guess, how can a community like Women in BIM help?
Yeah, I think it's similar to actually from what Kun Gesini said is that because of our culture as well, but I think we are kind of still in the process of changing. My team actually have 6 out of 7 women BIM coordinators. So suppose we are quite good at that. And I there there is blur. I think is really help to make this collaborative for the industry and for
We're having some issues, I think, with the
I'm having the issue
connection.
with
Yeah,
Benyatip voice.
yeah.
that's okay. We can summarize if you can, Benyatip, and then we'll move to Jirapo.
Can you hear me?
It's a little bit disconnected, but that's okay. I
Okay,
think
sure.
I think it's back now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
But yeah, just quickly, I guess the importance of, I guess, encouraging young women to kind of be involved in the community, I think, is one of the things that we really need to start doing. I know that obviously Oricon are very committed to diversity and ensuring that we have enough people across the different roles in digital which do support, that gender diversity piece, because, diversity supports a growth in new ideas, like I keep saying, innovation. So, I mean, Jirapo, what are your thoughts on in regard to, how women in BIM can help to grow skills and knowledge across industry and BIM in Thailand?
Yeah, sure. I think if we have a community that can help us grow more skill and knowledge in BIM, probably can help those who are interested in BIM but don't know where to start yet. To me, BIM is a huge process. Like, you just gotta find the right position for yourself. Like, if you are interested in technologies, you can ask for some advice from Kun Benyatip. She's worked for consulting firms who try out new technologies all the time. Or if you are interested in designs and model authoring, you can ask Kun Kesini for some advice. She's an expert on this. So a community where we are all can share our experience and advice. I just feel grateful for everyone that are in this session.
Oh, look, I agree. And I think the community, from my point of view, the community that has kept this group going has been instrumental across the world. Like I keep saying, we constantly have people from different countries and different cities asking what they can do to help us and support us. So I think that's really very important. And I think that the final point to make is, before we move to some of the questions, I think we've got 5 minutes for questions, and there are a couple of questions here, but a takeaway for the audience regarding women in BIM and your role in BIM effectively, and what you feel is a key message to give people regarding BIM or digital construction. And for me, it's really ensuring that you understand the importance of what's happening across the world in BIM, because from my point of view, in all the countries that I've worked in and had projects in, I think there's a very similar theme, and understanding how to impact a community, a project, a client, etc., requires you to have that context, I think, and understand the different initiatives that are occurring all over the world. And also, as we keep mentioning, the importance of international standards in 19650. And that's really one of the key requirements and ingredients for a successful BIM across an organization, I think. Jirapo, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. To me, working on BIM is about empowering, but not just yourself, but the entire ecosystem through the sharing of BIM know-how and skill with personnel from partners and supplier working in the property industry. We ensure sustainable growth together. I think it's time for us to start thinking about like, why are we doing this? Is it because the owner says so, or because we are all in this together, trying to elevate the way we work and lift up the standard?
Totally agree. That's
Okay,
wonderful.
we're all together.
Yeah.
We're all together, right?
For you that.
Totally agree. Yeah, that's wonderful. And Casey, your takeaway for our listeners?
For me, I think BIM is a process that help people to see things on the same page, because the most important thing is collaboration and communication. The hardest thing to explain is actually to my father, because my father is he is the contractors, and definitely he's like in his 60 when he knows about BIM, and he's the one who has the ability to read the whole paper of design drawings, like for construction drawing, architecture, engineering, like structure and MEP and specification, and he remember all that. And he thought that everyone will see the same picture as him. The thing is, I cannot. So that's why I see that BIM is something that to let out of what he actually see by using technology, using computers, and then either the operator or the people who work on site or the owner can see the same picture. So my key takeaway would say that the BIM process, if you actually know how to use the tools, the key concept of it is to do the collaboration and to do a better communication, so then we can, deliver a better, good quality and time projects.
Yeah, wonderful. I think so important to specifically because, without having, a strong driver behind implementing BIM, there's no point. And I think having quality output, being able to save on cost and time, really important mechanisms, I guess, for implementing BIM. And I think finally, Ben, your tip, for our listeners, what would be your key takeaway that you'd like to communicate?
I think BIM is the process that will actually shape the new way of design and collaboration and the construction as well. So it will give this new perception and way of working that will not be the same anymore, because now I think the approach to the design construction will be more integrated and more holistic due to the recognition of the importance of the information throughout the life cycle. So this would transform the AEC industry into a collaborative information lifecycle where everyone can benefit from this process.
Look, I think that's really important. And I think, again, one of the key points that we continue to make is about that whole collaboration piece and ensuring that we're constantly communicating and sharing ideas. Again, one of the key, I guess, processes or, recommendations for women in BIM is to constantly share our knowledge and to push through on our knowledge across different communities and different countries. So thank you, panelists. And I think it's been a really exciting conversation. There are a couple of questions here that I think we can probably focus should aim for or look to. And I know we've spoken about 19650 certification, but from your point of view, how important is that for industry in Thailand?
I think in terms of the certification itself, right now, probably in Thailand, we do not yet have any official certification that would prove that we have done or reach a satisfaction within the BIM process itself. I think right now Thai BIM Association is coming out with different position within the BIM life cycle with the training, and also they can also start to certify in that particular position. So they will have a particular criteria so they can meet. And that is not only for the technical side where, right now there might be a certification for Revit, for Navisworks that you can take. But this one is more about, the skills, the understanding about the BIM manager, BIM coordinator, or BIM specialist. so that it can be normal standard. So we hope to see that in Thailand soon. Yeah.
To add on that is a little bit as well. From Architect Council of Thailand, we actually setting up the BIM maturity skills for people, so they can understand better that if they would like to be a BIM modeler, what kind of skills that they have to be, and all that skills we are trying to link with the Thai BIM Association and also together with other association and institute in Thailand. So we hope that in the near future, there will be a course and also a certificate coming out from that. So as Khun Benyatip said, it could have the modeling certification. Let's say if someone interested in that, for Thailand, in other countries, the software might not only be Revit, it could be many softwares. But in Thailand, there are only two software, which is Revit and ArchiCAD, that are popular at the moment. So ArchiCAD provides, like Graphisoft provides a lot of training on modeling all the times, and sometimes it's free too, so they can join that. And on Facebook, let's say BIM Club and also Thai BIM, they're also sharing the course on that, like free course for them. And if they want to do a Revit, they also Autodesk learning pathways, which they can actually start study on that and get certificates. So when they apply for the job, you know, at least like if they submit the certificate, at least Nong Care or Nong Thiu know that, oh, all right, at least this, you know, the applicant actually have a skills on modeling or understand on the coordinations, and then we can move on the interview from that. That would be many certificates for free that they can apply right now within Thailand and also international.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you can just CC or the organizers just bring up the last slide in the presentation, because I'd just like to finish up now with our contact details for Women in BIM for those of you who are interested in getting in touch, because it is very important, again, for us to continue the conversation for BIM and continue to grow the initiative in Thailand for Women in BIM. So if possible, bring up that. Otherwise, for those of you that are interested in getting in touch, here we go, the final slide to find out more. We have Nicole that manages all of our administration. If you are interested in learning more about Women in BIM, our website is here. Please join our membership, where we have obviously the ability for you to connect with other women in BIM across your region, as well as obviously through social media. And aside from that, thank you very much again to the organizers of the event and the panelists. This has been a wonderful session to facilitate, and I've had a great time. So thank you, and thank you to the panelists.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. 1 hour has passed so fast.
It's so quickly.
Yes, it's so.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Everyone.
Bye.